This episode of SURTHRIVAL, Therapeutic Friendship, is sponsored by Chris Winchester. Chris is the best boss in the world. He was my former boss and such a therapeutic friend. And he offered to sponsor this episode in honor of my husband, Matt Gaines, which caused a big lump in my throat. So thank you, Chris, for being a therapeutic friend to me. Thank you for being an amazing boss and for sponsoring this episode of SURTHRIVAL. Welcome to SURTHRIVAL, the podcast about befriending grief. I am so excited about this series called Mourn with Those Who Mourn. And my guest today is a college friend. And I actually think we go back before college, but I honestly can't remember exactly when we met. My friend is Chris O'Rear. Chris lives in Nashville. He is a licensed psychotherapist. He has been a hospital chaplain, a minister, and he has just written a book that I absolutely love called Therapeutic Friendship: Cultivating Relationships That Heal. He reached out to me probably 2 or 3 months ago and said that he thought that the book might offer me some nuggets for my podcast. And when I read it, I definitely found that it was helpful to me. And so I immediately asked him if he would be willing to come on SURTHRIVAL and talk more about the book and really specifically talk about how friends can be therapeutic friends. So I'm going to let Chris introduce himself. And Chris, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Stacia, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you this way. I wish I was there with you in person because it would be good to see you in person.
Same.
So I will remind you that we go back to about first grade when our grandmothers both put us in the same vacation Bible school at a church in Alabama. And I first met you there as a vacation Bible school student in the first grade.
Okay, were we boyfriend and girlfriend during that vacation Bible school week? I have this funny memory of was Chris an early boyfriend?
It could have been.
Obviously, it was not meaningful to you because you don't remember.
No, I do remember, and that is true, Stacia. I was being coy, but yes.
All right. Tell us more about you besides you were one of my first grade boyfriends.
So I am licensed in Tennessee as a clinical pastoral therapist. Tennessee is one of the states that has a license for pastoral therapists. Have a Master of Divinity in Pastoral Care and Counseling and a Master of Marriage and Family Therapy, and have been doing psychotherapy as my primary work for the last 30 years or so. I have a practice in Nashville.
What is a pastoral? Did you say pastoral therapist?
Yes. So what that means is I do have a theological education, and I have been trained to integrate spirituality into psychotherapy. But as I tell people regularly, that if people want to talk about how their spirituality is impacted or affected by the things that are bringing them to therapy, I'm more than happy to talk about that, but it's not a requirement for people that come to my office. I'm not trying to make people look like me, believe like me, or think like me. I'm simply walking with people on a path that hopefully leads them to a deeper understanding of themselves and a deeper connection with other people.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just saying I have a practice in Nashville that is called the Counseling Center. Clever name. And there's 3 locations in Tennessee, and I have 5 therapists that work with me to help staff those 3 locations.
That's amazing. I recently saw Chris was interviewed on a television station in Nashville with his book. So, Chris, I want to know what inspired you. Is this your first book, by the way?
It is.
Okay.
Hopefully it won't be the only one.
I hope not either. I hope not either. It was very good. What inspired you to write on this topic?
Well, a friend of mine did a presentation on the power of friendships years ago, and I held on to that idea for a while. But through my training in psychotherapy, by being a client in psychotherapy, and having had a pretty significant therapy journey myself, I felt like there are people out there who might benefit from what I know, who could use deeper and more meaningful connections with their friends. Because as you know, we have an epidemic of loneliness in an age where people are so connected, but the connections are lacking depth that really make people feel seen, heard, and cared for.
Yes. So in your own words, if you were giving advice to someone that had a friend or a family member who was really grieving hard, maybe they're in the initial crisis mode, what are some of the things from the book that you would share with our listeners that you feel might make the biggest impact on their friend who was suffering loss as a therapeutic friend? Can you share some of those things with us?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things is just a fundamental skill of learning to listen well. And there's some simple, relatively simple tools that you can learn about and then learn to practice. But it is amazing to me that when you're sitting with someone and they share something with you and you simply repeat it back to them or paraphrase it back to them, they feel heard. And it happens to me. It happened to me when I was the client in therapy. Even as a seasoned therapist, when I was in therapy, I'd go in to talk about something and my therapist would, I'd say, this is this and this and this is going on. And they'd say, so during the last couple of months, this and this has been going on. And I'd be like, yes, you get it. It is kind of magic for someone to feel seen and heard, because it demonstrates that you're paying attention enough to be able to share with that person what you've heard. Asking people about their feelings about things. What's this been like for you? What kinds of feelings have been coming up for you? Because we don't often ask each other about feelings, and I think a lot of people have a discomfort with feelings. Like, what if I ask about a feeling and it stirs up something really big for them and I don't know what to say or I don't know what to do? And listening is always the answer.
Yeah.
You don't have to know what to say. But I think a lot of people avoid having those conversations because the big feelings are kind of scary for them. And I think some of the encouragement that I would give people is you don't have to have the right answer. You just have to be present with people. And even saying, I don't know what to say to you about that, but know that I care about you.
Yeah.
And I want to hear about your experience. That's sufficient. You don't have to know because there's no thing. People are often like, I don't know what the right thing is to say. And in their mind, the right thing is, I want to say something that's going to make the other person feel better. And I'm like, there's nothing you can say that's going to make another person feel better when they're in the midst of a serious loss or a tragedy or a crisis,
Yeah. You can't fix it because you can't fix death.
Exactly.
I mean, there's just, unless you're Jesus, there's just no coming back from that. Yeah. I think you touched on something that's really important. I think a lot of people don't ask about feelings because maybe they're not comfortable with their own feelings, but because of that, maybe they're not comfortable with other people's feelings. What are some ways that we can get more comfortable with our feelings?
There are a lot of reasons why people have difficulty connecting to feelings. Men in particular are enculturated to not feel. Certain households encourage people to not feel, whether that's said directly or indirectly. The message that is received is your feelings don't matter. And so people learn to shut their feelings off or avoid them. Other people believe that certain feelings are bad or negative, and so they don't want to access those. And so they don't feel comfortable with those feelings in themselves. And so it's certainly challenging then when other people express those feelings, because they don't know what to say or what to do or how to be present with that. So I think that learning to recognize the patterns of your own emotional style. And I do think this is one of the places where friendships can be helpful, but therapy might be required, because friendships and therapy are not the same, but friendships can be very therapeutic and therapy sometimes feels friendly, but there's a difference. And so understanding what your challenges are in accessing your own feelings, learning to pay attention to your feelings and allow yourself to feel things without judgment. I remember in my own therapy, I would feel something and then I'd say, why do I feel that? That's so dumb. Or this is ridiculous that I feel this way. And that doesn't help you move through that. It doesn't help you understand yourself. It doesn't help you access that feeling any better if you judge it the minute it comes up. So to be curious, I call it a humble curiosity, where it's like, I don't know what this is about. I don't know all the answers, but I'm going to remain open and be curious about it. And so we can do that with other people. We can also do that with ourselves, to just let it be, whatever it is, and feel what you feel and allow other people to feel what they feel.
Wow, you just articulated a surthrival principle. Feel the feels is one of the things that I say all the time. And that means identifying what you're feeling, which if you're not in touch can be difficult. There's a whole episode on that, on identifying feelings. And then listening to what those feelings are doing in your body and acknowledge them without judgment. And that's really hard for us because of what you just said, like, oh, that was stupid, or, how could I feel that way? You feel what you feel. You really can't help it. It's kind of what you do with those feelings.
Correct.
That matters. I also want to dive in just a minute. Like, Chris, one of the things that struck me in your book is that as a therapist, you also have gone to therapy for a long time. And I have told listeners that my 2.5-year relationship with my therapist has been like life-changing. I'm very thankful that I was seeing her for about 3 months before I lost Matt. I really believe that the time that we spent together uncovering some of my feelings and thoughts and fears were really critical to providing a foundation where I could move into surthrival after his death. I don't know that I would have been there had I not had that help on the front end. Can you talk a little bit about your own experience with therapy as, a client, and then also your experience as a therapist? And then maybe thirdly, kind of when is it not enough to talk to a friend? When can people know when they might need additional professional help from a psychotherapist?
Sure. So I will try to keep the version of my life shorter. But I will just say there was a period in my life where my life as I had known it kind of blew up. My own choices, my own decisions, things that happened in my life, I just kind of fell apart. And that resulted in me being separated from my wife and living on my own for a few months. And it was at that time that was not the first time that I had been to therapy, but that was one of the things that drove me back to therapy. And I went, my wife and I also went to see a really good marriage counselor that was amazing. And towards the end of our time, after a successful period of marriage counseling, I said to my counselor, I said, so if I want to do what you do, how do I do that? And that started me on the journey of continuing my training in psychotherapy. And it was in one of my early trainings that somebody suggested that more psychotherapy for me might be helpful, which was definitely true. I always feel like I can always find something to talk about. But I was lucky enough to find myself in an experience of what is called psychoanalysis. And a lot of people don't know about that anymore, but it's kind of like what you see on TV oftentimes, where somebody's laying on a couch and the analyst or the therapist sits at the head of the couch and takes notes as the patient talk to the ceiling and talk about your thoughts. But that experience was 4 days a week for 3 years.
What? And really?
Yes. And so, I would go Monday through Thursday, and, I might not have a big event or a big something that transpires between Monday and Tuesday. And so it was analyzing every conversation, every thought, dreams, interactions. And when you do that, you can go deeper and deeper to understanding. So when this person did this, what prompted you to respond this way, or what prompted you to do this, or how did you feel when this person said this? And so it wasn't some big blow up or some big event. It was just trying to understand what motivated me in any given day. But that also created this really interesting dynamic between me and the analyst, because I knew she knew every detail about me. Right. I told her things that no one ever knew about me. But I didn't even know if she was married or had children, or I didn't know anything about her. Well, the power dynamic in that is huge, because she knows everything and I don't know anything. But because of this relationship that we had, things like her going on vacation or her being gone for a surgery, I did know that, evoked strong feelings for me that were connected to my own past and my own history. And so I would be able to understand that and explore those things with her. But what I've realized for myself in therapy as I've trained is that power dynamic of therapy, where the therapist is completely unknown and the client is fully known, is not necessarily required. So I try to be a little more interactive with my clients. I tend to share a little bit more. As I say, I generally hope that the things that I share with my clients are things that are beneficial for them and not just random bits of information, but I am more forthcoming. So therapy has a more conversational feel. It can feel very friendly. But at the end of the day, therapy is about the benefit of the client. Whereas friendships, ideally, are going to be mutual.
Yeah.
Where both people in the relationship are getting something out of it. And that might mean that one friend is leaning heavily on the other for a period of time, but then down the road, it'll be the other way around, hopefully. And I think a lot of people have a good foundation of coping. Whether their coping is 100% healthy or not, they have a way that gets them by. They do fine. But then some life crisis comes along and knocks them off balance. And they need somebody who will come in and listen to them and be an encouragement to them and, just support them as they find their own feet again. And they can get their feet planted under them. That doesn't need to be a therapist. It can be a therapist, but a lot of times a really good friend who is willing to let you feel your feelings and listen to you and can help you get your feet back under you and get back on your way. Other times, a lot of those things are rooted in historical events, learned patterns of behavior, family dynamics, unconscious motivations. And I feel like that's where a therapist is more beneficial, because they know how to ask the questions and where to shine the light, as it were, and kind of point you in a particular direction of self-discovery. Yeah. And so therapists are not about telling you how to live or what to do. Therapists are about helping you find the answers that are inside of you.
Ooh, thank you. That is beautiful. And that has been my experience in therapy. And, some days we don't have anything major to talk about. And then other times we have a lot to talk about. And, and because she kind of knows the whole story, she can also remind me, if I'm telling stories to myself that are not true or that are partial truths, she can remind me of what is the truth, just because of all that we've kind of gone through together.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go back to your thesis of therapeutic friendship. So listening, you said, was the most important thing, and then kind of as a subtitle there, listening and allowing them to share their emotions without any judgment and just truly feeding back what they said so that they feel heard. These are skills that anybody can learn, and it does require practice, doesn't it?
It does require practice, learning what is truly helpful and overcoming our own anxiety to try to fix.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're sad, you're upset, you're angry. I feel tempted to rush in to try to fix that, make it better, ease it, and learning to hold a position of just open curiosity about that and not react to it requires some practice
And a
some
lot of
self-awareness.
self-discipline.
Yes, some self-awareness and self-discipline.
Okay, so what other things would you say to listeners in terms of being a therapeutic friend?
Just in general,
Mm-hmm.
I think friendship takes time. When you go to therapy, you generally go to therapy every week or sometimes every other week or, sometimes 4 days a week, whatever. But you have a time that's set aside for that. And we don't always treat friendships with the same priority. I think learning to make space to talk about deeper things, allowing for hard conversations. People often think that conflict is a sign that relationships are going bad, but it can be an indication that friendships are moving to a deeper level and people are kind of dropping their facade and their public faces,
Right.
and they're allowing themselves to be more open, which means then there's an opportunity for my true self and your true self to come into some form of conflict. And that's not necessarily bad, but you have to be willing to talk about that and say, oh, well, I think about this way. And they say, oh, well, I think about it this way. And we have a way in which we can work through that. We might learn from each other, or we might agree that that's just not how I do it, but it's okay that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to talk about difficult things, to work through challenges, and a lot of this comes from what I refer to, it's not me, like this is not a me concept. This is just, people talk about content and process in the psychotherapy process. So a person comes in and talks about something, that is what we would refer to as content. But if I ask you, what's it like for you to tell me that, that moves that to a conversation that is talking about, or talking about how you feel about talking about. And moving a conversation to a process level can often help you move to a deeper conversation. So if a couple or friends are locked in a conversation that's challenging and they're going back and forth and this way, no, that way, this way, no, that way, to explore what is important about this to you. What are you feeling? What do you hear me say when I say this? What's the story that you tell yourself about what my intention is? You get to a level of understanding, how are you processing this? And that can move you to a level of having a much better conversation.
Let's talk about some of those things. In your book, you talk about ways to help. Let's talk about some of the things that you might say to a person, a friend who's grieving, that would help them. Can you kind of go through some of those things that you share in your book on ways to help?
Sure. The things that tend to be more helpful.
Yes.
It's coming from this place of being open and being honest. So to be able to say, I don't know how you feel, but I'm here to help any way I can. Or I wish I knew the right thing to say that can make it better, but know that I care about you. In some places it's better to say nothing.
Right.
If you're worried about saying the wrong thing or you don't know the right thing to say, it's better to say nothing.
And people feel so uncomfortable with silence. They feel so uncomfortable, but That's a superpower. I was telling you yesterday on the phone, my friend named Carol, who is on the first episode, that is her superpower, her ability to just be present and sit with me in the quiet. It is amazing. It's an amazing gift to give someone.
Indeed. And sometimes, just being present and remaining open and available is better than trying to come up with the right thing to say or saying something that you think is going to make things better.
Mm-hmm. I guess we all have the desire to fix things to make it right. Is that a human condition, or is that a Western thing? What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is, I think that especially in relationships, men tend to do this more. I think women historically or stereotypically are better at letting their friends just vent and talk to them, where men are like, well, what you need to do is, and like, let me, and so I've got these ideas about how your life will be better. But generally, the underlying issue for everyone, I think, is this anxiety about, you're uncomfortable. I don't like seeing you uncomfortable. You're being uncomfortable makes me uncomfortable. I want to feel better, so I want to make you feel better. What can I say that'll help you feel better so that I can feel better?
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a lot of feels there.
Yes.
Okay, on the flip side, what are some things that well-meaning people say that are just the absolute wrong thing to say? Or maybe not absolute wrong, but they're not helpful.
It depends on a lot of different things, because in some circumstances, some of these things might not be horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But a lot of times these are things that are kind of pointing in a direction that is not going to be helpful. One of the ones that is kind of borderline is like, I know how you feel.
Oh, I hate that one.
Yeah. Unless you've been through the exact same thing, you probably don't have a clue. And even if you have been through something that is extremely similar, every person's experience of grief is a little different. And people want their experience of grief to be unique. So to say, I know how you feel, robs you of the uniqueness of your own pain. And so to be, to say, I know how you feel is generally not a good thing. And especially if you're comparing, like, I know what it's like to have heart surgery. I had a hangnail last week, no.
Yeah, and the way that makes the other person feel is you don't know what I'm feeling, because you're not me. You're not in my head. You're not in my heart and my soul. There's no way to know what I'm feeling.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's a trigger for me.
And then we want to make sense of our suffering, and we want to make sense of things when we're hurting. And people will hopefully come to a place where they make sense of their grief and they understand it in some way, but that's going to be based on a lot of things, like their own relationship with the God of their understanding, their theology of suffering, their community around them. And so, but to tell someone, there's a reason for everything, or this is all part of God's plan. It's like, so wait, my loved one being dead or my child dying of cancer or something is somehow part of a bigger plan. If that's your theology and it somehow comforts you that God is in control of everything, that's great. But that's not how everybody feels about it. That's not how everybody thinks about it. And when you're in the height of your grief, telling someone that there's meaning in their grief doesn't necessarily help them.
Yeah, totally agree. Chris, one last word from you. What would you say to the listener who knows someone who is grieving and is really struggling? What are some things they could do? What's your last word of advice as a therapist and the author of this amazing book, Therapeutic Friendship?
Thank you. Well, what comes to my mind is be willing to do things for other people that they cannot do for themselves. But ask permission to do some of those things. But don't offer to help if you're not really open or able
Yes.
to help. To say, what can I do for you? And then somebody says, I could really use that. And they go, oh, well, I don't have time for that. Or that's not what I had in mind, or that's not how I wanted to help, but you don't need to take over. You don't need to come in somebody's life and take over their whole life because they're grieving. Generally, I think that's going to be motivated by my desire to do something rather than it is my desire to help you.
Yeah.
So offer to help, be available to help, be present, allow for the fact that grief is going to take as long as grief takes.
Yeah.
So don't forget after all the casseroles are gone and the funeral is over, the person is still going to be experiencing loss, and they're still going to be grieving. And during that first year, especially, every birthday, every special occasion, every anniversary is going to be a reminder that that person is no longer there. And so, just I'm thinking of you card or a phone call. Hey, I realize today's a special day and I'm thinking of you. That would probably go a very long way to keep those people in mind during the time like that. That's
so true. Chris, your advice has been invaluable. Again, I loved your book, Therapeutic Friendship. Your book is on my podcast, and Chris has made a special offer for listeners. If you would like, he has a one-page PDF of what to say and do and what not to say and do. I will have that on my website, but you can also contact him directly and he'll send you that. Chris, go ahead and give us your contact information so that listeners could reach out to you.
Sure. Use the contact page on my website, which is Chris O'Rear, ChrisOrear.com. Or they can email me at chris@thecounselingcenterllc.com, and I'll be happy to send that out.
That's great. Chris, I'm so thankful for your friendship and for the fact that you reached out to me and said, hey, I have a resource that might be helpful to you, because it has been helpful to me and to our listeners. And I'm just so thankful that you were willing to come and share your wisdom with us.
Thanks, Tasha. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you for listening to SURTHRIVAL, the podcast about befriending grief. My hope is that something you've learned today has piqued your interest and you can take a baby step in your own healing journey. I would love to hear from you. To send me a message or even tell me your story, go to SURTHRIVALpodcast.com. If you'd like to book me as a speaker, you can also do that through the Contact Me section of my website. Please follow me and tell your friends.